Minutes ago, WWE Hall of Famer Rikishi broke his silence and delivered a heartbreaking message about his cousin Roman Reigns' sudden and unexplained disappearance from WWE. He needs help, Rikishi says, shedding light on the pressure, pain, and emotional turmoil Roman has been battling in silence. For weeks, the WWE Universe has asked the same question: where is the tribal chief? Why did the most dominant force in professional wrestling walk away with no warning, no farewell, and no statement? In this emotional exposé, we uncover the unseen toll of legacy, family, and fame. From Paul Heyman's quiet breakdown to Jey Uso's guilt and The Rock's rumored emergency trip to Hawaii, this video reveals how Roman Reigns' retreat wasn't part of a storyline, it was the desperate act of a man on the edge. Was it burnout, illness, or something deeper? Is Roman coming back, or has Joe Anoa'i left wrestling forever? This is not a scripted drama. This is not a gimmick. This is real. And it may be the most human story WWE has never told. Subscribe for breaking updates on Roman Reigns, the Bloodline, and WWE's biggest secrets. Like, comment, and share if you believe Joe deserves peace. It started with silence. Not the kind that follows a championship loss or a storyline injury. This silence felt different, colder, heavier. It crept across the WWE universe without warning. 1 week, Roman Reigns was the dominant force at the center of WWE's Bloodline saga. The next, he was simply gone. No entrance music. No backstage segments. No cryptic tweets. Nothing. His absence wasn't explained. It wasn't acknowledged. It just was. Inside WWE headquarters in Stamford, the tension was immediate. Producers whispered in hallways. Triple H was seen slamming his office door shut more than once. Paul Heyman, usually the ever-composed mastermind, looked visibly shaken during a creative meeting. The show must go on, they said. But how do you keep the show going when your tribal chief disappears without a trace? The fans noticed quickly. Friday Night SmackDown aired without Roman's presence, and not even a mention of his name crossed the broadcast. Commentators danced around the subject, focusing on Solo Sikoa's growing aggression and Jey Uso's silent glances into the crowd. But Roman's name? Erased. Some said it was a marketing pivot. Others thought it was building toward a major storyline twist. But those closest to the Anoa'i family knew better. This wasn't fiction. This was something darker. Then came Rikishi. The WWE Hall of Famer, the patriarchal cornerstone of the Anoa'i wrestling dynasty, remained silent for nearly 2 weeks. No tweets. No interviews. Nothing. Until a podcast episode dropped without fanfare. It wasn't a wrestling show or a TMZ headline. It was a quiet sit-down with a Samoan cultural outlet, small, niche, but trusted. And what Rikishi said would rock the wrestling world. "My cousin is hurting," he said, his voice trembling. "And I don't mean storyline hurting. I mean, deep hurting. The kind of pain you don't see on television. The kind that eats you up from the inside. Roman's not okay. And I think I failed him." The host was visibly stunned. The room went silent. And for a brief second, the man who danced in sunglasses and a thobe during the Attitude Era, who crushed opponents with a smile, looked utterly broken. He wiped his eyes, pulled his hood lower, and whispered, "He called me 2 days before he disappeared. Said he was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of being strong. He said he was done." What followed was an outpouring of emotion the wrestling world wasn't ready for. Rikishi didn't offer excuses. He didn't paint Roman as a hero or a victim. He told the truth, or at least his version of it. Roman Reigns, the longest-reigning Universal Champion in modern history, was battling something that couldn't be pinned to the mat. Pressure. Identity. Legacy. The weight of being not just a character, but a symbol. Behind the leather vests and tribal chants, Roman had carried the burden of a bloodline that spanned generations. He wasn't just the face of WWE. He was the living embodiment of everything the Anoa'i dynasty represented: strength, honor, and domination. But at what cost? Rikishi described the final phone call with haunting clarity. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sounded empty. He said, "Uncle, I did everything they asked. I carried this whole damn company. I made our name bigger than it ever was. But now I don't even know who I am anymore." That line shattered something in Rikishi. And when the call ended, just before dawn, with Roman's voice trailing off into static, there were no more words. Roman was gone. No goodbyes. No follow-up texts. Just a chilling silence that seeped into the family like fog rolling through a valley. As the days passed, stories began to emerge. Roman had cancelled a scheduled photoshoot in Los Angeles. His gym manager in Tampa said he hadn't shown up in over a week. His personal driver, a man who had worked with him for years, said his phone had been disconnected. Not turned off, disconnected. Within the WWE locker room, fear turned to paranoia. Seth Rollins reportedly cornered Paul Heyman backstage during a Raw taping, demanding answers. "Where is he, Paul? What did you do?" Heyman, for once, said nothing. Just walked away with his head down. Even Solo Sikoa, the enforcer of the bloodline, began behaving erratically. One production assistant claimed Solo snapped at a writer who had casually referenced Roman's absence in a promo pitch. "Don't talk about him like he's dead," Solo growled, before storming out. Whispers of a health crisis began to circulate. Some believed Roman had collapsed from exhaustion. Others speculated a mental health emergency. A darker theory claimed he had been diagnosed with a serious illness and walked away to protect his family. WWE, tight-lipped as ever, issued no statement. Roman's name was scrubbed from internal call sheets. Creative rewrites piled up. Plans for SummerSlam, Survivor Series, even WrestleMania 41, all put on indefinite hold. Triple H was said to be furious and concerned. "This isn't part of the show," he told a close confidant, according to backstage reports. "This is real. And no one knows where he is." But the man who perhaps felt it most deeply wasn't a producer or executive. It was Rikishi. In that quiet podcast interview, he spoke like a man confronting his own guilt. "We pushed him too hard," he admitted. "We made him the tribal chief, but we forgot he was still just Joe. Just a man. A father. A husband. A cousin." He shared one particularly gut-wrenching memory: WrestleMania 39. Roman had just retained his title in a brutal match, bloodied and breathless. After the camera stopped rolling, Rikishi met him backstage. Roman's smile was hollow. He looked at me and said, "Is this it? Is this who I am now? Just the chief until I break?" And I didn't know what to say. No one did. Because no one wanted to acknowledge what was hiding in plain sight. Roman Reigns was unraveling. Behind the sharp promos and cold stares, he was fighting a battle bigger than any opponent: himself. Years of pressure, the death of close family members, the responsibility of carrying an entire generation's legacy, all of it had been bottled up, sealed under the mask of a dominant champion. Until he couldn't hold it in anymore. Sources close to the Anoa'i family say Roman had quietly taken multiple trips in recent months, private flights to off-grid retreats, mental wellness clinics, and spiritual healing centers in the Pacific Islands. These weren't vacations. They were escapes. Not from fans or paparazzi, but from himself. Each time, he returned more distant, more detached. One cousin, speaking under anonymity, said Roman had started journaling obsessively. He'd write these long entries about what the tribal chief meant, what the legacy cost him. It was like he was preparing to disappear. And then, he did. 3 days before his scheduled appearance on SmackDown, Roman reportedly left his home in Florida with no security, no assistant, and no explanation. A source close to his wife said she thought he was headed to the gym. Hours passed. Then days. When he didn't return, she called Rikishi. That's when the panic began. WWE higher-ups were notified. Local police were discreetly contacted but advised not to launch a formal search unless there was proof of danger. Paul Heyman made 3 frantic calls to Roman's private number. All went to voicemail. And for the first time in over a decade, Roman's family, his company, and his fans were united in one terrifying truth. He was gone. And no one knew if he was coming back. Rikishi's voice cracked as he ended the interview. He needs help. But not from the WWE universe. Not from us screaming yes in arenas. He needs help from us, his family. We failed to see the signs. And now I just pray it's not too late. He stood up, removed his headphones, and walked out of the studio in silence. The episode went viral within hours. Suddenly, Roman's disappearance was no longer just a missing superstar storyline. It became something far more human. Far more real. Fans began posting tribute videos, not in memory of Roman Reigns the character, but in support of Joe Anoa'i, the man. Rikishi's words echoed across the internet like a war drum in a quiet canyon. Commentators choked up during segments. Former WWE superstars began tweeting cryptic support, no hashtags, no context, just quotes like "You never really know what someone's carrying and I hope he's found peace." Even The Rock, famously private about family affairs, posted a black square on his Instagram with a single caption, "Uso." But behind the viral reactions and heartfelt concern was a growing dread. Roman Reigns, Joe, had not simply vanished for a break. He had, by all accounts, walked away from a machine that never stops. And that machine was now beginning to show signs of breakdown. Backstage at WWE, the absence of Roman was no longer just felt, it was feared. Solo Sikoa had reportedly become uncontrollable. Without Roman's steady command, Solo had grown more volatile, more isolated. In one instance, he showed up to rehearsal, refused to take direction, and left after kicking over a set piece. Paul Heyman tried to intervene, but even he seemed lost without his tribal chief. He built his entire image around Roman, one writer said. Without him, Paul looks like a man trying to hold a kingdom with no crown. Triple H, once the architect of Roman's dominance, was now scrambling to rewrite years of long-term planning. Sources claimed he held an emergency creative summit, trying to decide whether to officially write Roman off or hold out hope for his return. But the mood in the room was grim. No one wanted to say it out loud, said one producer, but everyone was thinking it, what if he's not coming back at all? Among the roster, a ripple effect took hold. Jey Uso reportedly requested time off. Jimmy was seen pacing backstage at Raw, declining interviews and refusing to speak during promo tapings. Jacob Fatu, the Bloodline's new monster in waiting, broke kayfabe during a live house show, dropping to one knee and making a silent Samoan prayer gesture mid-ring. The Bloodline wasn't just breaking, it was grieving. And then, on the 17th day since Roman's disappearance, something changed. A private letter, handwritten and marked only with the initials J.A., was delivered to Rikishi's residence in Los Angeles. According to a close family source, the envelope contained 2 things, a single-page note and a folded photo, an image of a young Roman Reigns standing beside his father, Sika Anoa'i, during his early wrestling days. The message was short. Just 12 words. I'm not lost. I'm just trying to remember who I was before this. The handwriting matched Roman's. Rikishi reportedly sat for hours with the letter, reading it over and over until the ink began to smudge beneath his fingertips. He didn't call WWE. He didn't call Triple H. He called one person, The Rock. What was said between the two remains private, but the very next day, Dwayne Johnson canceled all his scheduled media appearances. He flew to Hawaii. Alone. Wrestling insiders began whispering again. Had Roman returned to the islands? Was he seeking refuge within the deep Samoan traditions that shaped his family long before a championship belt ever crossed his waist? There had long been tales of the Anoa'i family owning sacred land, a remote stretch of volcanic forest untouched by commercial hands. Some say it was there, deep within that ancient land, where Roman had fled to rediscover something greater than glory. Meanwhile, WWE was now in full-blown crisis mode. Network partners were demanding answers. Sponsors were growing nervous. Fan speculation was turning into fan frustration. Why hadn't WWE addressed Roman's absence publicly? Why wasn't there a press release, a tribute, a medical update, anything? But the truth was far more complicated. Roman Reigns wasn't missing because of injury. He wasn't off the grid due to storyline burnout. He had walked away because something inside of him had broken. The endless travel, the responsibility of carrying WWE through COVID, the manipulation, the betrayals within the bloodline, it had all become too much. And when the camera stopped rolling, and the fans stopped chanting, all that was left was Joe. The man who had battled leukemia. The man who buried his father. The man who held an entire family on his back while pretending he was still standing tall. And Joe was tired. Insiders began to leak more details. Roman had reportedly expressed to close friends that he no longer felt in control of his narrative. "I don't know who I am anymore," he had said after a meeting with executives just weeks before his disappearance. "Everyone has a version of me, the tribal chief, the locker room leader, the icon. But none of them are real. None of them are me." That quiet identity crisis had metastasized into something bigger. When the storylines blurred with reality, when the family alliances on screen began to mirror the manipulation behind the scenes, Roman's world began to crack. And no one noticed until it was too late. But one person had noticed. Jey Uso. Sources claim that Jey had reached out to Roman days before his disappearance. In a late-night voice message, Jey reportedly said, "You ain't gotta carry us no more, yus. We carry in you now. Just say the word." The message went unanswered. Jey, heartbroken and haunted, has since withdrawn from all public events. He was last seen in New York, boarding a plane alone with a hood pulled low and a photograph of the original Bloodline trio, himself, Jimmy, and Roman, folded in his back pocket. The tribal war had left a battlefield of broken men. But Roman's disappearance wasn't just the loss of a wrestler. It was the fracture of a myth. The tribal chief had been more than a gimmick. He had been a beacon for his people, a symbol of honor, dominance, and strength. But no one had stopped to ask if the man behind that symbol was still standing. And now, with Rikishi's voice echoing across every wrestling podcast, news outlet, and fan forum, the illusion has shattered. "My cousin needs help," Rikishi had said. "Not another belt. Not another WrestleMania moment. He needs healing. And if that means he never steps back into that ring again, then so be it. I just want Joe back." WWE has yet to respond to the growing demand for clarity. As of today, Roman Reigns remains unaccounted for. His last official WWE appearance aired nearly a month ago. The Bloodline storyline has stalled. Merchandise has been pulled. WWE's own website quietly removed upcoming matches from his calendar. But among all the speculation, theories, and silence, one chilling truth remains. When a man like Roman Reigns walks away from everything, his spotlight, his family, his empire, it's not because he's weak. It's because the world forgot he was human. And maybe, just maybe, that's what he's gone to find again. The days turned into weeks. WWE remained tight-lipped, and the fan base grew restless. In the absence of answers, theories multiplied like wildfire. Some believed Roman Reigns had gone underground to prepare for the greatest return in WWE history. A dramatic, kayfabe-shattering moment that would upend the Bloodline storyline forever. Others speculated that this wasn't a work at all, but a genuine collapse of spirit, a man so burdened by expectation that he chose to disappear to preserve what little was left of himself. Yet the reality, if anyone dared confront it, was far more painful. There was no script. No return plan. No merchandise countdown or surprise promo. This was real. Roman Reigns, once the immovable object at the center of WWE's universe, had chosen silence over spectacle. And in doing so, he had left a void no one knew how to fill. Behind the curtain, the Anoa'i family was in crisis. The elders, normally unified in silence, were now meeting in secret, uncertain how to guide the next generation through a moment so raw, so public, and so unpredictable. Word had spread that Sika, Roman's father, had grown despondent. He no longer answered calls from WWE brass. He refused interview requests. Some said he hadn't left his home in days. And when asked about his son's whereabouts, he responded only with a whisper, "He's walking his own path now." But one voice refused to stay silent. Rikishi, emboldened by the wave of public concern after his interview, agreed to a televised sit-down with ESPN. The network promoted it heavily, not as a wrestling segment, but as a cultural moment. A father figure confronting the disappearance of the dynasty's brightest star. The interview aired live, prime time. Rikishi walked into the studio dressed in black. No shades. No leather vest. No traces of the flamboyant character fans had known for decades. He sat across from the host, hands clasped, eyes red. The opening question was simple: where is Roman Reigns? And Rikishi, raw, unfiltered, and human, answered with no hesitation. "I don't know," he said. "And that terrifies me every day." He went on to describe the emotional toll Roman's departure had taken on the family. He spoke of unanswered messages, of sleepless nights, of quiet prayers offered in the early hours of the morning. But most hauntingly, he spoke about the pressure of legacy. "We raised him to be a warrior," Rikishi said. "Not just in the ring, but in life. We taught him that the bloodline was sacred, that he carried our ancestors with him every time he stepped out there. But maybe we never gave him space to just be Joe." The studio fell silent. He recounted stories from Roman's early years. Not the ones fans knew, about titles, about WrestleMania moments, but private ones. Like how Joe used to sneak out of family barbecues just to sit by the ocean. How he once told Rikishi, at age 12, that he didn't want to be famous, he just wanted to be good. How he cried when his first dog died, and how he didn't want anyone to see. "He always carried everything inside," Rikishi said. Always. The interview trended worldwide within minutes. Hashtags like #WhereIsRoman and #WeNeedJoe flooded social media. Fans began organizing digital vigils. Candle emojis replaced championship belts in Twitter bios. Wrestlers from across companies, AEW, NJPW, Impact, posted messages of solidarity. Because this wasn't about WWE anymore. It was about a man in crisis. And then came the audio. Late one night, a 13-second voice note surfaced on Reddit. Unverified, grainy, but eerily familiar. The